What separates good designers from great designers?
I'm curious first, before I try to figure out how to possibly answer this question, is what is your intention by asking this question?
To kind of step up the game for yourself if you want to be an overachiever and do great things.
Does anybody have any clue on how to answer a question like this?
Maybe the difference is that a great designer does more than design in addition to being a good designer.
Okay, this is going to get real interesting. I love where we're going with this. So you need to do more than design. So you have to transcend being a designer. Okay, Ming, you have the mic now.
I guess having the capacity or willingness to push yourself to failure in order to achieve whatever the success that you're defining. We as faculty, we have these discussions sometimes with students. How do you become better doing creative strategies and things like that? Can you step out of that realm and get into other things that you might be interested in and expand upon that? And then some of those indirect insights can actually be channeled back in.
Thank you, Ming. As a practice of critical thinking is whenever I have an idea, I try to disprove the idea as soon as possible. So I'm going to try that with Petrula's statement. So Petrula, I would just ask you, do you know great designers that only do design?
Yes.
Okay, so that would just disprove that right there. See how that works? I'm often misquoted on this, that people think that, Chris, you just poo-poo and you look down on people who just do a thing, that they're masters at craft, and I do not think that at all. I think this world works better when there are people who put in their 10 or 20,000 hours just to master something. There's actually a series of videos and accounts online that showcase people who do the most mundane things really well. Are you familiar with the pizza box guy? He just sits there and folds 1,000 pizza boxes at a time. Or the guy who makes naan and he just throws it across. Or the 6 guys who hammer a spike into the ground in perfect unison. In the book, The Obstacles Away, there's a quote there in Latin that I don't remember. My son would probably know it, which says something to the effect of, there's nobility in doing humble things well. And I really believe that. And when I got to travel to Japan, I got to see that philosophy manifested in the people there. They take so much pride in just making sure the table's clean, or to take out the trash, or prepare a piece of fish, or whatever it is. And I think there's something really beautiful about that. So I think in our culture, we feel like we have to do more. I think the way to achieve excellence is to do less, but to do better. I'm not saying that those of you that have the capacity to do more should not do more. You totally should. But I think you should try to master something first before you move on. There's a tendency in our culture, because we get to see examples online of people who seem to have a lot of success. They have all the material social proof and they're very young, and it starts to create this very unreal narrative about what can be done in what period of time. And I promise you, probably unscientifically, 90% of them are scams. And it's just a matter of time before they get arrested. So it's this kind of narrative that we get fed into our brain that seeps into our subconscious, and why there's such a high rate of depression amongst young people and why they're so anxious right now. That's one of the questions, because we're being fed a false narrative about what can be done. So I'm going to be a proponent for you just focusing on being good, because it's freaking hard to be good. I think it's really hard to figure out on a gradient, on an objective level, that we can get 10 people in a room to even agree what is great design. It's very hard to figure out what good design is as it relates to what great design might be. But I think we can pretty much figure out what is bad versus great. There's a much bigger contrast between bad and great. So I'm going to assume, Mimi, that you know what bad design is, right? But let's just say you don't know what bad design is. Many years ago when I was teaching here, I had this really amazing, super smart student. His name is Daniel. And Daniel, when I was talking during my critique, I said, that design isn't elegant. It wasn't his work. I was just like, that's not elegant. And I kept using that word over and over again. And Daniel, he raises his hand. He's like, Chris, I know this is a really obvious question, and I'm kind of embarrassed to ask you, but what is elegant? I was like, what is elegant? I don't know. I've been throwing around words that I don't even define, and there's no shared definition. So I'm going to present to you one way of looking at information to help you get clarity. So let's try this with bad to good design. We don't even need to go great. Okay, just the difference between bad and good. So Mimi, you said you know what bad design is, right?
Yes.
Okay, what is the trait of bad design? So let's try to use something much simpler, something that's easy, like just let's get a base hit here. Let's not go for the home run just yet.
It's not using the design principles.
What are those design principles that you speak of? Just give me one.
Contrast.
Contrast. What about contrast? Is contrast good or bad?
In general, it's good.
All right, so we'll write contrast. I mean, everybody should know this, right? I mean, I agree. You're safe here. On one side, if you have lots of contrast, the more contrast, the better. The less contrast, not so good. What we want to do is we want to keep doing this. We want to find one parameter that we think is good or bad, and then we contrast that. So then we can say on some kind of gradient scale, like, yeah, there's lots of contrast, and we can talk about how to achieve that contrast. So those are all things that designers here know how to do, and we can make a long list of them. And then we start to get a sense like how we know if our design is good or not. Dr. Samuel Holtzman, he sat in my class one time, and I thought I was a pretty good teacher until he told me what he thought afterwards. And then I had a come to Jesus moment. And he said, here's the thing. What does it mean to teach things? It means that your students can look at the work and make similar decisions without you being there. That was so profoundly different than the way I taught and the way I've been taught. Those of you that are old enough, who've been here long enough, know pretty much how most teachers here teach, which is, this is wrong, that's stupid, and you're terrible. And this is all right. That's usually how it is. But then you walk away like, I don't know how you made any of those decisions. So Dr. Holtzman told me, when you're looking at a piece of work, what are the 5 things you're looking for, and break those down, and then write them down and put it on the board. And then ask your students when they're looking at that work to go down the list to critique it themselves. If they can make it down to the bottom 5 while surviving the gauntlet of 5, they got a shot of it being pretty good. So whenever we run into problems like this that are kind of very nuanced and very difficult to define, I find that using some kind of slider like this helps out a lot. Those of you who work with clients who get really broad briefs where you can't really tell what they want, I'm going to tell you right now, here's my tip to you. Here's tip number 1. Do not walk away from a client afraid of asking what it is that you need to know to do your job. Stay in that pocket of discomfort for long enough so you get clarity. My business coach, who passed away last year, he told me this before. He says, tell them up front it's going to be grueling, that you're going to ask lots of questions and they're going to get annoyed and they're going to feel like it's a waste of time. But then to promise them that you don't want to run off and do something without clear understanding of what the problem is, and more importantly, what it is that they want. They're like, make it epic. Make it clean and modern. Make it organic. They use these words and we think we know what that means, but it's dangerous to walk away and make that assumption. But if we can just work on the fundamentals and keep executing on the fundamentals and practicing articulating that to others, it will further cement and clarify in our mind, which will allow us to make the decisions even faster.